Makes Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. Chapter 37. Danny. Sitting at my desk, working, I noticed a tall, lanky white dude walk into the newsroom and head toward my row. He was casually dressed, a silly-looking, stringy-brimmed straw hat on his curly head, a lightweight mustard-colored zip-up jacket, patty boy slacks, and a pair of those shoes construction workers wear. No sport coat or tie. He was dressed so casual, I assumed he'd come in for a story interview. Then he walked straight over to the aisle where I sat, plopped a notebook down on the empty desk behind me, and took a seat. I thought, just what I need, another cracker near me. I stood up to go to the supply cabinet. Before I could leave, the new guy sprang from his seat, extended his hand and said, "Hi, I'm Danny Baum." He was 3 inches from my face, smiling like there was something funny. I shook his hand. "I'm Nathan," and I walked away. Later, I saw Danny walking across the newsroom. He had a goofy demeanor, long strides, arms swinging wild, like a northern Gomer Pyle or Mr. Green Jeans on Captain Kangaroo. A white woman reporter who sat near me leaned over to another white reporter, pointed at Danny and whispered, "That's the new guy. Do you know what he did? He moved into a black neighborhood. Everybody's talking about it. Somebody's got to talk to him." Apparently unaware that I overheard, they burst out laughing, as if this new guy, this crazy northerner, had done the stupidest thing in the world. I looked at them a minute and thought to myself, these are the same pseudo-liberal crackers who would get up in your face and swear they're not racist and they don't see color. Yet they thought it was hilarious that a white guy was so colorblind that he moved into a black neighborhood. I decided that the next time a white person told me he didn't see color, I was going to call him a liar to his face. Let him know he can't insult my intelligence and get away with it. After I finished going off on white people in my head, I turned my thoughts back to this Danny guy. What kind of person was he to move into a black neighborhood? Was it a mistake on his part, or did he do that intentionally? Newsroom gossip held that he had come to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution from the Wall Street Journal. Normally, that's considered a step down professionally. The Wall Street Journal is, after all, one of the top newspapers in the country. When asked why he left the Journal to come to Atlanta, Danny had told someone, "The people at the Wall Street Journal were too stuffy and pretentious. I decided I'd get a real job with real people who would let me chase fire engines and write about it." In the following weeks, I watched him closely to see what he was about. It didn't take long to see that there was something different about this cat. Other people in the newsroom, blacks and whites, recognized it too. I found him to be different in a pleasant way. Whenever he said something to me, there was a straightforwardness, a childlike honesty that I didn't get from most other white people. With him, I didn't feel the hesitancy I felt from other whites or the racial baggage getting in the way. And he'd ask me the damnedest things out the blue. One day, he slid his swivel chair back near mine and asked, "Why aren't black reporters more aggressive around here, Nate?" It was the kind of thing I knew a lot of whites around there wonder about, but were afraid to ask for fear of sounding racist or for fear of revealing that they were, in fact, racist. But Danny didn't seem to care. I concluded it must have been because he was secure in his mind that he wasn't racist and he had nothing to hide. He was simply curious. He didn't know. So he did what any intelligent person should have done. He asked rather than assumed. I respected that about him and found that, in spite of myself, there was something about this dude I really liked. Since we sat so close to each other, we began rapping a lot at our desk. I learned Danny had done his own examination of the white mainstream and reached some of the same conclusions as me, that it was totally fucked up, that they needed to scratch all the rules governing the macho corporate game and go back to drawing stickmen on cave walls because that's about how far they come in human development. By the time he came to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Danny had decided that he was no longer going to play the game by their silly rules. He didn't brown-nose the bosses or try to join the white folks' privileged insiders club in the newsroom. He didn't try to get in with all the right people to gain an edge. In fact, he held management in contempt and talked about them as much as I did. When Hosea Williams led a march in Forsyth County to protest the racism and open hostility to blacks who moved there, Danny took part in the march, even though our bosses had ordered reporters to stay out of it for the sake of objectivity. When he did that, I concluded this dude was truly wild. One day, Danny slid his seat near mine and said, "Nate, how about coming over to my place for dinner this weekend?" "Let me see what I got planned," I said, "and I'll get back to you on that." I didn't have anything planned. I said that to buy time to think about it. Thinking about it, even considering spending my free weekend time at a white person's house, was a major leap for me. Had it been anyone else, I wouldn't have had to think about it at all. I'd have declined without blinking an eye. But I considered it with Danny and decided, what the hell, I'll give it a try. Besides, I wanted to see just where he lived and asked him why he had moved into a black neighborhood. I went to Danny's place that weekend. He definitely lived in the hood. He'd rented a detached house in a working class neighborhood in Hosea Williams' council's district. Danny was dating another reporter at the paper, Meg Knox, who lived in Savannah and worked for the paper's bureau there, several hours from Atlanta. She seemed just as laid back and cool as Danny. We ate, then went into his living room, sat down, talked, and drank beer. It was the most comfortable I'd ever felt around white people. I didn't feel like Danny and Meg were judging me by their standards all the time. They didn't try to pretend there were no differences between us like everyone else I knew. They celebrated our differences, and we joked about contrasts in the way blacks and whites talked, cooked, dressed, danced, and did everything else. At some point, Danny told me he moved into this black neighborhood because he can get the best deal for his money there. "I like this house. It has a porch and a yard. The neighbors are friendly. Actually, I'm thinking about buying it." We talked about our taste in white music and black music. I told him how I learned about white music, about the time I stole those tapes out of some white person's car. Danny played a tape for me and explained why a particular white artist I asked about was currently so popular. The singer was Bruce Springsteen, and the tape was Born in the USA. We talked a lot about race. I guess it helped that Danny was Jewish. Danny told me that he had his share of brushes with racism and it didn't sit well with him. He asked me about Louis Farrakhan, whom he said frightened Jews with his statement that Hitler was a great man. "Nate," he asked, "why does Farrakhan hate Jews?" I said, "I don't agree with everything Farrakhan says, but I don't think he hates Jews. I think he's widely misunderstood and his comments are often taken out of context. He's simply pro-black. A lot of white people assume that if you're pro-black, then you must be anti-white. You have to listen closely to what Farrakhan says to understand where he's coming from." He asked to borrow a tape of Farrakhan so that he could hear it for himself. We talked about a lot of other things. I was surprised to learn that he had actually read books written by black people. James Baldwin, Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison. It amazed me that a white person would do that when it wasn't required of him. He seemed equally as surprised to learn that one of my favorite authors was the Jewish writer Chaim Potok. I left Danny's place late that night, surprised that time had passed so quickly, and shocked I had actually spent a weekend evening, voluntarily, with whites and had a grand time. In return, I invited Meg and Danny over to my place for dinner. They met Debbie and our small children. It was one of those evenings where the differences between Debbie and me seemed to vanish, a night when there were no arguments about in-laws and money problems. After we put the children to bed, The four of us sat on the front porch and laughed and talked for hours. It was the first time I had any white people over to my house. After a while, I found that I looked forward to talking with Danny. We grew closer and, in jest, gave each other silly nicknames. I started calling him Danny Boy, and he called me Nate McMahon. He'd walk into the newsroom, look at me and say, "Nate McMahon, how you doing, bro?" I say, "Fine, Danny Boy, just fine." At some point during the 2 years he lived in Atlanta, somebody broke into Danny's house. I felt strange about that. On its face, it supported the stereotype of crime-ridden black neighborhoods. I wonder if it would conjure up racial stereotypes and send him running for cover, as it would many pretentious liberal rights I'd seen. But Danny treated it like any break-in. It didn't seem to matter to him whether the burglar was black or white. He stayed right in the neighborhood until he left Atlanta. More than anything else, that told me that this cat was for real. When Danny found out that I had a bike, he suggested we get together and go riding one Saturday morning. I agreed and we were on. He pulled up to my place the following Saturday, driving an old green station wagon he brought from a colleague. We threw the bikes in and drove deep into the country. We picked a turnoff spot, parked the car alongside the road, and unloaded the bikes. We rode for hours and talked about everything. I asked him tough questions about whites. He asked me tough questions about blacks. He'd offer his theory on the matter, then wait for my response. I respected his sincerity, so much so that I even confided in him that I'd been to prison. I hadn't told anyone else at the paper about my prison past, not even other blacks. The country road was deserted, except for an occasional passing pickup truck. After a long period of silence, Danny came at me with another question. "You're pretty angry inside, aren't you, Nate McMahon?" "Nah, Danny boy, I'm not angry. I'm fucking furious." Danny frowned. "God, Nate, you think about race all the time. Give it a rest, man. It ain't healthy." I told Danny I didn't have a choice in the matter. You can sit around and intellectualize about race when you want to, and when you get tired of it, you can set it aside and go surfing or hang gliding and forget about it. But I can't. Race affects every facet of my life, man. I can't get past race because white folks won't let me get past it. They remind me of it everywhere I go. Every time I step in the elevator and a white woman bunches up in the corner like she thinks I want to rape her, I'm forced to think about it. Every time I walk into stores, the suspicious looks in white shopkeepers' eyes make me think about it. Every time I walk past whites sitting in their cars, I hear the door locks clicking and I think about it. I can't get away from it, man. I stay so mad all the time because I'm forced to spend so much time and energy reacting to race. I hate it. It wearies me. But there's no escape. Man, there's no escape. When I finished talking, I felt like I had preached a sermon. I didn't realize I had so much frustration bottled up until I let it out on Danny. At first, I wondered why I had told him so much of what was going on inside my head. Then I realized that despite all I said in the past about not caring what white folks thought, I cared a lot. In fact, I had spent my whole life reacting to what they thought. The notion that one of them really cared about what I thought moved me. Danny was the first white person I met whom I actually saw trying hard to understand. It meant a lot to me that he tried because he wanted to and not because he had to. By the same token, he helped me see the world through white eyes and helped me better understand the fear and ignorance behind prejudice. I learned something else from Danny that hadn't been clear to me before. I learned how little even the most highly educated white folks really know about blacks. He was very well educated, and yet he struggled to understand some of the most basic things about black life in America. He struggled because in school, he hadn't been taught diddly about blacks. Even though he saw us every day, and interacted with us, we were puzzles to him. That showed me that the education system in this country has failed white people more than it's failed anybody else. It has crippled them and limited their humanity. They're the ones who need to know the most about everybody because they're the ones running the country. They've been taught so little about anybody other than white people that they can't understand, even when they try. During one of our bike rides, we stopped and sat down on the side of a grassy mound to take a break from the scorching sun. About 100 yards behind us, there was a huge white house sitting on a large tract of land. We were sitting there, talking and tossing pebbles onto the street, when a white man crept up behind us. "Hi," he said. We both said hello. I expected the white man to tell us to get the hell off of his grass. Instead, he said something that startled me. "You guys look hot. I've got a full-size swimming pool in my backyard if you want to take a swim." Initially, his words didn't register with me. In my mind, there was something wrong with that picture. After all, this was deep South Georgia, and we were in some country town. I had come out there half expecting to encounter hillbillies with gun racks to the windows of their pickup trucks. Now this cat was inviting us, a black and a white, to take a dip in his swimming pool. Danny looked at me and I said, "No thanks, we're about to leave." The man was almost insistent. "Really, I don't mind. Help yourselves to cool off if you want." "No, we've got to leave." The man smiled warmly and said, "Okay, if you change your mind, feel free to come on over. Thanks." We got up and rode off. Later, I reflected on what that might have been about. I think the white man was moved by the picture of a white guy and a black dude sitting on the side of the road rapping. I could be wrong, but I think the sight of us warmed his heart and he wanted to take part in our interracial communion for reasons of his own. Danny and I never discussed it, but I never forgot it, because gestures like that were so rare in my experience. Danny told me in 1987 that he and Meg planned to go to Africa to travel and work as freelance writers for a while. Initially, I felt envious that he, a white guy, would get the chance to go to my homeland, which I'd never been to as an adult. I told him how I felt. "See, you white motherfuckers get to do everything in the world you want to do." He insisted, "Nate, there's nothing stopping you from doing what you want to do in life. You can go to Africa too." That started a running debate. "No, I can't, Danny. You don't understand. You white boys can take off from work anytime and hitchhike across the country or spend a couple of years hoboing in Europe. Then, when you get ready to resume your career, the white establishment will welcome you back with open arms. But if I try to do some shit like that, Mr. Charles is going to want to know where I've been and why there's a gap on my resume. He's going to want me to give an account of any time that was not spent slaving for him." I had no frame of reference for Danny's opinion. All I knew was that every black person I had ever met had lived life aware of the limitations imposed by race, and that those who tried to do what they truly wanted were met with intense opposition. I felt it was easy for Danny to think there were no ceilings because he hadn't known any. Danny didn't win me over on that issue before leaving Atlanta, but he dropped a piece of advice on me that changed my thinking about something else. He said, "Look, Nate McMahon, you may not believe this, but there are several white people in the newsroom who are really good people. You should give them a chance before writing them off as racist. Get to know some of them. You might be pleasantly surprised." Later, I thought about what he had said. I thought about those whites who had tried to be friendly and the seemingly meaningful talks I had had with some of them in the newsroom. Among them was a political reporter who seemed sincere and 2 editors I had grown to like. Maybe, I thought, I should open up more and be receptive to the fact that there are some good whites in the world. Somehow, just thinking that thought made me feel better. I realized that I needed to know that there might be other white people like Danny and Meg. and that there was some reason for hope in this deeply disturbed nation of ours. Danny and Meg just left for Africa. Of all the white people I know, they are among the very few I can call friends. It's sad, this gulf between blacks and whites. We're so afraid of each other. January 10th, 1987. Okay, this concludes chapter 37. And I'm going to give y'all something that I think is very key. Maybe even like one of those keys of life. But your emotions and your thoughts, they control the type of things that you attract to yourself. So if your mind is constantly on something negative, something that's low vibrational, like if you're constantly thinking about lustful things, hateful things, envious things, prideful things, or too much pride, these are all things that are low vibrational. And keeping that on your mind and keeping that emotion running through your body, that's going to attract more of that into your life. But when you're able to elevate your mind, start thinking about some higher vibrational things like love and commitment and your family and creating different things. These are ideas and thoughts and emotions that's going to attract more positive things to yourself. I think one of the goals of white supremacy, of the people who actually run this system in the shadows that we don't see, they are hell-bent on keeping us focused on things that's low vibrational. And they even designed these algorithms to give you more of what you're looking at on social media. So if you look at one post that's dealing with something low vibrational, it's going to feed you a whole lot more of that. And in turn, your ego is going to think, okay, this is what I like, so I want to see more and more of this. Remember, it's entertainment over education in this country. Entertainment and distractions. You keep them entertained, you keep them distracted, you keep them hating each other, hating their neighbors, hating themselves, hating the people around them, hating the people that don't look like them, hating the people who could have a slightly different or very different opinion about life. These are all things that keep us fighting amongst ourselves, and it keeps other people in power who want to control the world. But something that's amazing, just by listening to this type of content, taking your mind off of such mundane things and taking it off of entertainment, but putting your mind back on itself and learning more about self and what you have going on and understanding your feelings. These are the type of things that changes your life. And in turn, it will change this place. That's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing this reality start to change because more and more people are becoming aware that there's something special inside of me that I need to get to know. One of the big things that Nathan McCall deals with is this idea of racism and white supremacy affecting every aspect of his life. There's truth in that argument that Danny was saying to him, like, man, you got to stop thinking about this stuff all the time. That's true. He has to learn to put that energy into something else, and that in turn will help him to have a better life. But it's also worth noting that, white people are just people who won't get to live as a black person. They need to understand, well, this is something that's pervasive in my life. It's everywhere. You can't get away from race in a sense, but you can rise above racism. That's one of the things they don't want you to know, that you can get over this thing. And a lot of that comes back to just knowing that you have the solutions inside of you. Like for your own personal life, you can figure out any problem that you have. Problems automatically come with solutions. There's a solution to every problem. You just have to figure it out. So just think about that whenever you're presented with a problem. Again, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I'm going to leave a link to my ebook. Make sure you guys check that out. Because again, it's all about gaining back control of your mind and putting yourself back into that state of peace without having to need, drugs or other substances or entertainment to put you in that mold. It was good for Nate, and maybe it was fate for him to meet that Danny guy. God will put you in positions to learn the lessons that you need to learn. And one of those lessons that Nate needed to learn was, I don't have to be mad and have all this anger in my heart towards every white person. They'll say that's like one of those, I don't know, you're not down for the people if you say something like that. But, I think about what Dick Gregory said before he died. He said, if I was in charge, I'd make all you black folks apologize to these white folks. Because the white folks you mad at, they couldn't help you even if they did like you. Like I said earlier, the people they put in front of us to be angry at and upset with, they're not the ones really running the world. The true power is in the background. So like the ones that you see, like if you see white people around you, chances are those aren't the real white folks. You're not around the ones who have the real power. You're around some other people who just been programmed with bad information. So this also comes back down to reprogramming yourself, reprogramming your mind. And I'm not saying it's your responsibility to reprogram them, but it is your responsibility to take back control of your own mind. And you can't let anyone, society, family included, stop you from getting to be to your best self. So anyway, I think I ranted enough. This was a good chapter. I'm glad Nate got to meet this guy and come to that realization because, that idea of constantly being focused on white supremacy and what white people are doing, that'll hold you back. And we see that with the people who go down the conspiracy theory path. That's all they're thinking about, what they got going on. What are they going to do next? It's a way to keep you fearful. Fear is a low vibrational emotion as well. So if you're constantly worrying about, oh man, they got this coming down the pipeline and they're going to do this to us and this is bad and this food is bad and watching this is bad, you're going to attract more of that into your life. Put your focus on you. Control what you can control and focus on that and watch how your life improves. But all right, thank you guys for tuning in and listening. We're getting closer to the end of this book, end of this story. I'm going to do an overall summary when we get to that point. And again, thank you. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Thank you for sharing this content with other people that you think may be interested or even people that you think need to hear this story of Nathan McCall's or whatever I have to say at the end of these chapters. Thank you for tuning in. And I'll see you on the next episode of Ron's Library and Ideas. Peace.